Okay, well, we are making our way through the sequel to The Way of a Pilgrim called The Pilgrim Continues His Way. And he just gave his confession, if you remember, in last week's talk. He had stopped into a small town and someone said, "Oh, there's a wonderful priest here that will take your confession, who will give you insights that are very useful to have." So he goes to that priest and he gives him his, what he thinks is a very thorough confession. And then the priest chastises him and accuses him, well, not accuses, but points out that four things that he didn't do. And they are, let's see, I see number four, number three. Dear friend, a lot of this that you have written is quite futile. First, you don't bring into confession sins which you have already repented of and had forgiven. All right. Next, you don't call to mind other people who have been connected with your sins. Judge yourself only. And thirdly, the Holy Fathers forbid us to mention all circumstances of the sin and tell us to acknowledge them in general. Fourthly, you have to repent, and you are not repenting of the fact that you can't repent. Your penitence is lukewarm and careless, he says, which is quite a challenging thing to have someone tell you. And fifthly, you've gone over all these details, but the most important thing you've overlooked. You have not disclosed the gravest sins of all. You have not acknowledged or written down that you do not love God, that you hate your neighbor, that you do not believe in God's word, and that you are filled with pride and ambition. And so the young man is taken aback, but not at all defensive about it, and says, "I don't understand what you're saying." And so the priest gives him a small writing or a small pamphlet, and we're going to read that pamphlet tonight and see what it has to say. He says that the pamphlet's titled "A Confession Which Leads the Inward Man to Humility." Right. And really, the idea in Christian confession, really, that's the idea. In Christianity, there's a strong emphasis on being what you are and not presenting yourself better than what you are. Now, I'm not saying that's the general practice, but that's the general encouragement. And that confession is meant to keep you humble, to where you are honest about your shortcomings and you consider them and you bring them to the beloved for forgiveness, for your own sake, really. God has no problem forgiving you, but for your own sake, for you to accept that forgiveness, and for you to grow in your faith in grace and the mercy of the divine. They do their confession. So here he says, "A confession which leads the inward man to humility. Turning my eyes carefully upon myself and watching the course of my inward state, I have verified by experience that I do not love God, that I have no love for my neighbors, that I have no religious belief, and that I am filled with pride and sensuality. All this I actually find in myself as a result of the detailed examination of my feelings and my conduct thus." Now, this is really a wonderful practice. It's not uniquely Christian. We just finished, if you were in this morning's class on Advaita Vedanta, Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj was teaching us to be fully aware of the contents of our mind, of the working of our inner habits, and to be fully acquainted with our interior world. Why? Because then we come to see some of the truths that this priest is going to be sharing with our pilgrim tonight. So number one, I do not love God. For if I loved God, I should be continually thinking about him with heartfelt joy. Is that not true? I mean, anybody who's had a love in their life, you just are constantly thinking about them. You can't wait until the next time you get together. I have very fond memories of making little love letter cards, and putting all kinds of little artistic designs on them in order to give to in these my teen years, not that long ago, but So this is what you do to someone you love. This is the way you react to a feeling of love inside. Every thought of God would give me gladness and delight. On the contrary, I much more often and much more eagerly think about earthly things, and thinking about God is a labor and a dryness. If I loved God, then talking with him in prayer would be my nourishment and my delight, and would draw me to unbroken communion with him. But on the contrary, I not only find no delight in my prayer, but I find it in an effort. I struggle with reluctance. I am enfeebled by sloth, which is laziness, and am ready to occupy myself eagerly with my unimportant trifles, if only it shortens prayer and keeps me from it. My time slips away unnoticed in futile occupations, but when I am occupied with God, when I put myself into his presence, every hour seems like a year. If one person loves another, he thinks of him throughout the day without ceasing. He pictures him to himself. He cares for him. And in all circumstances, his beloved friend is never out of his thoughts. But I, throughout the day, scarcely set aside even a single hour in which to sink deep into meditation upon God, to inflame my heart with love of him, while I eagerly give up 23 hours as fervent offerings to the idols of my passions. I am forward in talk, but frivolous matters and things which degrade the spirit, that gives me pleasure. But in the consideration of God, I am dry, bored, and lazy. Even if I am willingly drawn by others into spiritual conversation, I try to shift the subject quickly to one which pleases my desires. I am tirelessly curious about novelties, about civic affairs and political events. I eagerly seek the satisfaction of my love of knowledge in science and art, and in ways of getting things I want to possess. But the study of the law of God, the knowledge of God, of religion makes little impression on me, and satisfy no hunger of my soul. I regard these things not only as a non-essential occupation for a Christian, but in a casual way, as sort of a side issue with which I should perhaps occupy my spare time at odd moments. To put it shortly, if love for God is recognized by the keeping of his commandments, and I not only do not keep them, but even make little attempt to do so, then in absolute truth and conclusion follows that I do not, in fact, love God. That is what the Basil the Great says. The proof that a man does not love God and his Christ lies in the fact that he does not keep his commandments, and that we don't obey them. So this is that painful, but very helpful inner consideration when we go inside and begin to watch our mind. And these are difficult teachings. But we're going to put some Vedanta in here to kind of help us kind of package this in a positive and in a helpful way. It's like you go inside and you notice these things about the body and mind. You notice these things about the disposition, right? And you take note of them. That's all. You turn to the beloved, you acknowledge them, and you lay them down quietly, and you put your mind back on the beloved. Because the beloved is lovable, and that will manifest in time through honesty. Honesty, straightforwardness, truthfulness. Thakur says is the austerity of modern day times. That our austerity for these days is simply being truthful and straightforward in our life. And doing something like what this priest is teaching his pilgrim to do is more about honesty. It's not about tearing ourselves down, because we don't own our shortcomings. It's important to know that. It's not the I, it's not the soul that's being colored by these shortcomings. It's mind that's being colored by these shortcomings. And when you identify with mind, you'll suffer for these shortcomings. But you shouldn't take them on as something that makes you feel guilty or makes you feel ashamed. That's identifying with the faults. You don't identify with faults because you cannot be touched by faults. You are the divine self. You are ever free, ever pure, ever beloved of God. And so while you can acknowledge the condition of the mind is faulty, that there's problems in the practice, that there's problems in all of that, you can know that they're true, that is true, and you can accept that. But that awareness itself is going to correct it primarily because it's not what you are. And as soon as you become aware of these things in yourself, your natural state will exert, will push against them. And you'll begin to recognize their signs and they will slowly repair. So these things are about acknowledging these troubles and not owning them, not describing yourself in that way, but describing the mind in that way or the body in that way, your ignorance in that way. All right, but not to own them in and of yourself. He says, number 2, I do not love my neighbor either. For not only am I unable to make up my mind to lay down my life for his sake, right? No greater love hath man than this, that he lay down his life for another, right? So that's what he's talking about. He's like, I don't love my neighbor to the point that I'm willing to die for them. He says, but not only am I unable to make up my mind to lay down my life for his sake, but I do not even sacrifice my happiness. I don't sacrifice even my well-being and peace for the good of my neighbor. If I did love him as myself, as the gospel bids, his misfortunes would distress me also. His happiness would bring delight to me too. But on the contrary, I listen to curious, unhappy stories about my neighbor, and I'm not distressed. I remain quite undisturbed, or what is still worse, I find sort of a pleasure in them. Bad conduct on the part of my brother I do not cover up with love, but proclaim abroad with censure. His well-being, honor, and happiness do not delight me as my own, and, as if they were something quite alien to me, give me no feeling of gladness. What is more, they subtly arouse in me feelings of envy or contempt. This is a beautiful way of putting this, because at first they sound very harsh, like, oh my God, how can you not love God? Oh my God, how can you say that you don't love your neighbor either? But when he draws it out in this plain, straightforward way, can't you feel inside the same feeling as like, oh, wow. Oh yeah, that's exactly what it would look like. That's exactly how it would be if I actually did care and love them as myself, And these are important pointers for us because, at least within the Christian context, and certainly in Vedanta also, well, in all the religions, you're going to find the same order of things in all religious scriptures. That the first and most important thing is to love God, with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your mind, and with all of your strength. And we only come to know what that means through this kind of contemplation, this kind of consideration. What does it mean to love with all my mind? What does it mean to love with all my heart? What does it mean to love with all my soul? And when we come to contemplate those things and we lay that template up against ourselves, we're going to come up wanting. We're going to come up short in that. And it's good to know that, to accept that. Now we're covered by Thakur. Thakur says, you do 1/16 of what I do, and I'll cover the rest. For every one step you take toward the divine comes running toward you with 10 steps. All right. So we know that this problem is not something we have to hold on to and be sad about and get ourselves torn down over, because that's not the point of knowing this. The point of knowing this is our humility and our awareness of really our awareness of how we're going to be transformed in a matter of time. But to know these are the places we work on. These are the places we keep in our mind. These are the practices that we add to our daily life in order to build these weaknesses up, in order to strengthen them. Right. So when I go to the gym and I look in the mirror, I don't get I don't get discouraged and go home, even though most of the people there will tell me to. But you know, you take a record, you look at it, you're like, wow, look, I've got a little bit of just a touch of a paunch there, and oh my gosh, look, there's just not a whole lot of muscle in my arms, and oh my goodness, why is my head so big in relation to my body? You start you start asking these questions and looking, but the point of looking in the mirror is not to become sad or to break down. It's to know what you can work on. It's to know on how you can rise above, become better. And so this whole idea of this inner search within ourselves, right? When we go in, we have to very honestly look at the condition of our mind. We have to go inside and look at the condition of our inner world. And we have to do it objectively, and we have to admit difficult things about ourselves. And you know what? Frankly, I understand not looking at them, and I understand not wanting to deal with them, because that is what creates the world of delusion. You see, in this world, the part of the reason, at least one of the reasons, that we are not approaching God and not signing on for these ideals is because we don't reach them, and we aren't like them. And facing that is too difficult. And the nature of all enjoyment in this world is distraction. And what is it that we want to be distracted from? We want to be distracted from these ideas, from these kinds of things. I'm not a good person. I don't care about others. I'm greedy. I'm lusty. I'm angry. I'm jealous. I'm selfish. I'm narcissistic. Whatever the problems are, they're numerous and everywhere. And as a spiritual person, we look at them straight on because we know they're not our nature. They know that that's not what we are in and of ourselves, that in and of ourselves, we are divine. We have that image of God within. And we sit in that place, right? We sit in that secure refuge of God. And we look at the condition of the mind, and we look at the condition of the body. And we honestly accept them in that condition. And then what? We love ourselves, right? We love ourselves, and we love God, and we think about the love of God, and we think about the grace of God. And in that thinking of the love and grace of the divine, we're inspired to a response that fixes this list of faults, these lists of errors inside. And so when you see faults in yourself, it's not a call to sadness, it's a call to newness. How's that for, I feel like now I'm doing a Christian retreat somewhere. The call to newness.
So Maharaj, how does staying in the moment jive with this, right? I mean, if you were staying in the moment, then there would be not carrying your past with you, not carrying all that confession that you need to make. I mean, somehow, not being in the background, I fail to understand as to why you carry the baggage.
But, yeah, right. No, it's an excellent question. It makes a ton of sense. The reason is that most of us are not able to stay in the moment. That most of us cannot get a clear view of the moment. And it's because of these vices and because of these shortcomings, and it's because of the distractions that we've pursued to deal with these shortcomings in the absence of fixing them. And so in order to clear our conscience, clear our, what would you say, our karmic plate, so that we can have a moment in the presence, so that we can have an honest moment of clarity in the self, we have to deal with these things. We have to see our attachments to them and begin lessening them through discernment. So, if we are able to be in the moment and to absolutely, completely forget through grace our past and the conditions that has placed in our samskaras, absolutely. What you're saying is absolutely true. We don't need to deal with our baggage. We don't need to get lost in our past. But if we're already affected by them, where our mind is pulled continually out of its refuge, where the mind is continually forgetful of the divine, where it is in fact true that we're not manifesting love and wisdom when the moment is silent. That's the time for this. This is part of an earlier time, a beginning. Then I won't say beginning time, because then we'll all be like, oh, that's for beginners. This is for the beginner. This is for the beginning that lasts 99% of spiritual life. And so it's a matter of purification, and it's a matter of practice in order to be able to experience a pure moment, in order to be able to experience a one-pointed thought of the divine, of God. So this is the period of practice. It's not a way of being. It's not saying this is the ideal, be this way.
Yeah, I guess for me, you notice it like right away, right? You don't come and meet somebody with a feeling of love, and you notice it, and you say, okay, no, you right away you try and correct that, or you see your attachment to your child or whatever, and you okay, I'm feeling the attachment, and you say, okay, I need to, So so it's instantaneous, but I guess I understand what you're saying.
It's trying to make sure that we don't delude ourselves into thinking more of ourselves than we should.
Right.
In one sense, it's also to make us aware of our shortcomings, so that when we get affected by them, like you said, in the moment, that we're aware enough to catch them, we're aware enough to change course before the course has already started. That's the trick, because I find that the big part of life in these terms is that I know in myself, I have not in the past been able to catch my faults early enough to actually change the course. They've already affected my behavior. I'm already moving down that road of not liking that person, or being rude to that person, or whatever it is. And this practice helps us to become sensitive enough that we see the spark of selfishness before it manifests as selfishness. And when we're able to catch it at that point in ourselves, it's much easier to snub out a spark than to put out a full fire. And so this inward practice of observing mind, and observing it with a clarity and an objectiveness, in the light of grace and the company of the beloved, is very helpful for developing that sensitivity, so that we can deal with these things and allow our nature to shine through without having to be going through a spoiled mind or an overly active ego, that we can be true to our nature, true to our love within. So I think that's, for the most part, is where this is going. It's not a discussion of an ideal or the way that we're supposed to be as mature selves, as mature spiritual seekers, but it's a discussion of tools along the way that are helpful for clearing the mind, the conscience, and placing us more fully and more durably, I guess, in the presence of God, in the presence of that divine light. So, all right. Number 3, I have no religious belief, neither in immortality nor in the gospel. If I were firmly persuaded and believed without doubt that beyond the grave lies eternal life and recompense for the deeds of this life, I should be continually thinking of this. The very idea of immortality would terrify me, and I should lead this life as a foreigner who gets ready to enter his native land. On the contrary, I do not even think about eternity, and I regard the end of this earthly life as the limit of my existence. The secret thought nestles within me. Who knows what happens at death? If I say I believe in immortality, then I am speaking about my mind only, and my heart is far removed from a firm conviction about it. That is openly witnessed to by conduct and my constant care to satisfy the life of the senses. Were the Holy Gospel taken into my heart in faith as the word of the beloved, I should be continually occupied with it. I should study it, find delight in it, and with deep conviction and devotion, fix my attention upon it. Wisdom, mercy, love are hidden in it. It would lead me to happiness. I should find gladness in the study of the law of God day and night. In it I should find nourishment like my daily bread, and my heart would be drawn to the keeping of its laws. Nothing on earth would be strong enough to turn me away from it. On the contrary, if now and again I read or hear the word of God, yet even so it is not only from necessity or from general love of knowledge and approaching it without any very close attention, I actually find it dull and uninteresting. I usually come to the end of my reading without any profit, only too ready to change over to secular reading, in which I take more pleasure and find new and interesting subjects. Well, this guy is really being brutally honest about himself. But I think this is all very generally true in us. We can see the level of our delusion in all of these things. I remember when I was 7 years old, and I was sitting in church. I was in Germany at the time, and I remember the lecture was a hellfire lecture. It was the preacher was really just going at it, and I was 7 years old, and I was sitting there, and I was hearing this danger of hell, hanging over my head, and at that point I hadn't been baptized, which in my tradition meant I wasn't saved. And I was sitting there, and I was just feeling this sense of panic for myself, but not only for myself, but all of my friends. I was thinking, oh my God, this is horrible. And I felt this terror. But I distinctly remember looking around the church, and nobody was bothered. No, nobody had any distorted face of shock or fear or intensity of like, oh my God, we have to do something about this. And I just remember at that point, I just let it go, because I was like, okay, I must not understand something. I must not get something. But see, this is the truth of this. Even for us, when Thakur says, this is your last birth, you're coming to realization, you're coming with me, that's a comforting thought. It's a nice thought. But do we react like in a way that we really would react if we believed? Like, oh my God, we would go nuts. We would just be walking around, da, 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 that's right, food. I'm on my way, we'd be like singing songs, doing steps down the street, be like, yeah, that's right. Oh my God, how many more days do I have to wait? But of course, it's not really how it is, because we don't have a taste of it yet. Through our spiritual practice, when Mother gives us a few tastes here and there, she takes care of this problem. She wakes us up inside, gives us a bit of that hope. And if not personally, then at least reading the stories of some people who have, or knowing people who are experiencing some of these things, we can find some solace in that and some inspiration in that. But see, all of these things that are being listed, they're changed through transcendence, and transcendence happens through discernment and the acceptance of grace. And the acceptance of grace, the acceptance of pure love, come through contemplating it, through putting yourself in the presence, in the moment, allowing yourself to be inspired by a pure love. And then we turn it into experience by the way that we live. You go out and do a random act of kindness, and take a note of how that changes your mood. Take a note of how that makes you feel inside. Do something randomly kind. Do it several times in a row, and then go sit in the park and think about it. And you will know that the reason that we don't love God and don't love our neighbor is because we haven't tried. Because inside, we're made for it. Inside, we are the very essence of that love. We are full of an infinite ocean of love to give. And so it's not that we're not loving. It's not that we're that we don't have anything to give. It's simply that we have not allowed ourselves to indulge in the act of giving, to indulge in the act of loving. to indulge in the act of selflessness, because you find that when you do it, that it opens your eyes to the presence of God. How? It opens your eyes to the presence of love, because love is always inspiring to love. And I've watched some of these YouTube videos. That sounds silly, but it's one of the reasons I watch YouTube videos, is because I like how they renew my appreciation of humanity. I I like to watch the things about contagious laughter, and things about made me smile. Some of these subgroups on Reddit that show the good side of humanity. And when you see love being acted out, when you see somebody do something kind in a video on YouTube or somewhere else, what a lift that gives to you. What a touch that really is to the inner self, to the inner nature. And I highly recommend it. If you find yourself to not love your neighbor, go out immediately and just do something kind for them for absolutely no reason. Go out and do something sweet for somebody for absolutely no reason. Vivekananda says, if you are able to do a single act that is absolutely unselfish in this life, he says, you will have your realization. So that's what we practice. We go out, we just keep trying until we manage to do one thing that had no thought of selfishness in it, had no thought of any advantage to ourselves in it whatsoever. To try and do one thing like that in our lifetime is really our goal. If we say that knowing God or loving God is our aim, then that's how it translates. Doing one completely unselfish act at least once in our life is what we're shooting for. And this kind of inner accounting of our condition is helpful for getting there, because it will show you the alarm, the need for change, the need for inspiration, your need for God, your need for the divine, your need for inspiration. And so we follow it to that place.
Yeah.
Number 4. Yes.
No. Just a comment. I said, obviously, I'm not doing enough of that. So, in terms of, like, not doing enough reflection on what should be done. One gets so busy with the day-to-day lifestyle and just trying to render just those things correctly, just do your routine things correctly, versus like how this Pilgrim is saying, to go out of your way to do things, like what you said, to go out of one's daily life chores, enough to keep just this thing
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this keeps us from falling asleep at the wheel, following our habits and getting comfortable.
Right.
Because we're better than most, not as good as many, but we're not uncomfortable with our normalcy.
Yeah.
And it's not that we should be uncomfortable with our normalcy, but if we keep our eyes on our ideals, we'll be uncomfortable with our normalcy. We'll be like, God, I could have done so much better. And you do better. And you,
Yes.
I
had a question. So I guess I know you're supposed to do things unselfishly, but I guess that feeling you say to get, when you do something like that, I thought that feeling itself was also like part of your ego. So I guess isn't it kind of like that good feeling that you get is kind of like also part of your ego?
No. I mean, in truth, ultimate truth, yes, you're absolutely right. But breathing is your ego also. Having a body is your ego also. Hugging your mother is your ego also. There can be no doership. There can be no manifestation. There can be no individuality, separation from the beloved, without egoism. So yes, it's true. But see, what will happen is that we won't do those things because we don't want to. But the reason we'll tell ourselves is like, oh, that would have been egoistic. We use that argument to neuter something that was more beautiful than it was detrimental. and that's the thing. So what you're saying is true, but it's not the big truth in it. Service, yes, is egoistic most of the time. There's some element of egoism in all forms of service. There's no doubt about it. And so we work on our selfishness. We work on our egoism. We don't stop doing good. We do good again with an effort of not being egoistic about it. And then we do it again, trying even more so not to be egoistic about it. And pretty soon we're just in the habit of doing good and we're not thinking anything about it. It's become a part of our behavior, a part of what we are. So yeah, there's truth in what you're saying, but that's not enough of a reason not to do it. It's a reason to do it more and to attempt to do it better each time. And in the beginning, when I tell you, go home and do something nice and then go and sit and think about it, it's because we don't realize that it's our nature. That's the reason we don't do it. We think that we would rather not go out and embarrass ourselves, or we'd rather not go out and we'd rather take that $5 and buy a coffee with it, opposed to give it to that person. And we believe in our vice. We believe our vices will make us happy, and so we spend our money and efforts on our vices. And we believe that service and kindness and unselfishness will not fulfill us, but will be an exertion, will be an exception, or will be, an effort. And so what lies behind my saying, go out and do something nice for somebody and then go think about it, is to counter the idea that it's not natural for us to be nice and to be unselfish, to counter the idea that it's not our nature to be giving and to be loving, and to remember that the ego is the foreigner in this body mind, not love, not wisdom. Those are not the foreigners. The foreigner within our mind is selfishness, is wrong thinking that causes us to be small-minded. And so to break that, we go out and we do things that we think are not fun things to do. Like, who goes out and serves people for fun on a Friday night? Nobody does. But in fact, if people spent their Friday nights going out and doing service to other people, they would come to find out that they're a lot happier in life than they are drinking themselves under the bar on Friday night. It's like, not that that's the only alternative, but you see, it's just that understanding. We do things in life that do not add to our quality of being, do not add to our fundamental joy and bliss in existence. And we keep living that way. We keep doing it that way. And so what our thinker, what our teacher here is saying, and what Sri Nisargadatta was saying this morning, is go deep inside and become aware of how things affect you. Because one of the first things you'll begin to understand is that vice sucks. Being a mean person sucks. You don't want to do it. So stop thinking that somehow it makes you an alpha male, or that somehow it makes you a leader, or somehow it makes you great, that you can, snubbing someone else makes you better than them. It's like, because there are people in the world like that. I just read in the newspaper about this cop that was making fun of some woman that was killed, and calling and referring to her as a unimportant person, or a low grade loss. That is when you are almost dying of egoism. Those are the kinds of thoughts that are going through your head, where you can discount somebody else and the quality of their life, when you can snub somebody openly and feel good about it. That is when your ego has become such a disease. It is on the verge of killing you. It is on the verge of killing you. So we want to break that habit, and we break that habit by going out and doing the opposite of what the ego says, and proving the ego wrong by saying, look, see how happy how good that felt. Feel how whole as a person I feel. And then and it goes on. And it's not that this is the motive for anything that we do, but this is a demonstration that it is of our nature to love God, to love our neighbor, to love ourselves. That we are of the nature of wisdom. It is, the idea of vanity, the idea, the idea of vanity and the idea of implants and facelifts and ginormous nails and all this stuff that we see, our ideals in this society, our stars, our superstars, the people our celebrities that we look up to just have somebody have the nerve to stand up and say, that's bunk. You look ridiculous, you feel ridiculous, you're empty, and when you're 75 years old with a fake patoot, there's going to be nothing but hilarity there. And it's going to be at your expense because you were stupid and didn't pay attention. And this is the language that this guy is trying to give to us, to teach us right now. He's trying to shock us out of this reverie of ignorance, to shock us out of this reverie of ignorance. Stop it, and stop it now. This is not what you are. This is not who we are. This will not lead you to glamour. This will not make you a beautiful person. This will not give you fond memories when you pass away in your obituary. This is not who you want to be. Stop it. That's all he's trying to say to us. It's like, wake up, you dumb cow. Think about it. Look at what's happening to your life. Look at what's becoming of you. Add 50 years to your behavior, and what are you going to look like? What are you going to be in this world? It's like, certainly not what you want to be. All right, so number 4. I am full of pride and sensual self-love. Okay, this is a good one. All my actions confirm this. Seeing something good in myself, I want to bring it into view, or to pride myself upon it before other people, or inwardly to admire myself for it. Oh God, I'm already burning from this. This is crazy. This is utter truth. This is the nature of egoism. This is the nature of our disease. All right. Now I know this. I know it's funny. I get it in that sense. But if I was sitting here talking about the condition of cancer, and was naming off these things and saying, this is how you know you have cancer, it's not funny in that regard. Our disease is egoism, and this is what it looks like. And we're doing a terrible job right now. I want you all to know that. All right. So this you do something good and you feel good, you pride yourself in it, you start identifying with doing something good instead of priding yourself with the image of the beloved that caused it. That's where this credit goes. We as ego selves, there's no existence there. There's no reality there. And so this good comes from deep inside. It's not a calculated action. If it's calculated action, we're just children at that point. We're toddlers, which is all right, because toddlers grow out of it. And so if we're in a state of ignorance, it's all right, because we're going to grow out of it, because we're spiritual seekers, but we have to accept that we need to grow out of it. We have to accept that we've got work to do in this regard, so that we can see God in the moment, so that we can experience freedom, so that we can experience the bliss of manifesting pure love and pure wisdom as a manifestation of our own self as God, right? Although I display an outward humility, yet I ascribe it all to my own strength and regard myself as superior to others, or at least no worse than they are. Or just even the fact that you go around comparing yourself with others. let's just hit it right in the root. Don't bother. Compare yourself with your nature, with God. Hold on to that. Don't go comparing yourself with others. That's nonsense, regardless of whether you're better or worse than they are. Who the hell cares? Be yourself in your truest sense. Be true to your nature. Forget this nonsense. This social web of lies. If I notice a fault in myself, I try to excuse it. I cover it up by saying, I am made like that, or I'm not to blame. I get angry with those who do not treat me with respect and consider them unable to appreciate the value of people. I brag about my gifts. Here we go. All right. Mute all. Yes. Appreciate the value of people. I brag about my gifts, my failures in any undertaking I regard as a personal insult. I murmur and I find pleasure in the unhappiness of my enemies. If I strive after anything good, it is for the purpose of winning praise, or spiritual self-indulgence, or earthly consolation. In a word, I continually make an idol of myself and render it uninterrupted service, seeking in all things the pleasures of the senses, the nourishment for my sensual passions and my lusts. Going over all of this, I see myself as proud, adulterous, unbelieving, without love to God and hating my neighbor. What state could be more sinful? The condition of the spirits of darkness is better than mine. They, although they do not love God, hate men, and live upon pride, and yet at least believe and tremble. But I? Can there be a doom more terrible than that which faces me? And that what sentence of punishment will be more severe than that upon the careless and foolish life that I recognize in myself? On reading through this form of confession which the priest gave me, I was horrified and thought to myself, good heavens, what frightful sin there are hidden within me, and how up to now I've never noticed them. The desire to be cleansed from them made me beg this great spiritual father to teach me how to know the causes of all these evils and how to cure them. And he began to instruct me. So see, that is this pilgrim's reaction. It was a self-awareness that was awakened in him. You know, there was a knowledge of his faults that he had become so comfortable with, and so steadily accustomed to overlooking them. You know, that he had never dealt with them, had never acknowledged them and brought them into the light of awareness, so that they could be undone, so that they could be transcended, so that they could fall into grace and be finished. So this is what we're trying to do, awaken that inner light, that inner knowledge that keeps an honest direction for us, you know, shoots for the highest ideal, a beautiful ideal, and doesn't compromise its way out of success. And that's why this harsh language is there. That's why the sages talk to us so directly at times, because we are in fact accustomed to our faults and have grown complacent in our renunciation and in our discernment. And we've come to accept ourselves, which isn't a wrong thing in the sense of accepting ourselves, but accepting ourselves with a false idea of who that self is, right? So we've accepted a false idea of who we are, and we carry it forward. And there's no need to carry it anymore. There's no need to carry those false ideas. There's no need to carry the burden and wonder why life is so difficult, and wonder why we struggle and why we just can't seem to get forward. You know, now we know. Now we have a clear light shining inside. Now we see and recognize the shortcomings that are there. And naturally our response is to turn to the beloved. Admit it all and say, oh my God, I never wanted to be this way. My nature has been your nature. I wanted to shine like you shine. I wanted to love like you love. And look what I've done. You know? And he began to instruct me. You see, dear brother, the cause of not loving God is want of belief. Want of belief is caused by a lack of conviction. A cause of that is failure to seek for holy, true knowledge, indifferent to the light of spirit. In a word, if you don't believe, you can't love. If you are not convinced, you can't believe. And in order to reach conviction, you must get a full and exact knowledge of the matter before you. By meditation, by the study of God's word, and by noting your experience, you must arouse in your soul a thirst and a longing, or as some call it, wonder, which brings you an insatiable desire to know things more closely and more fully, and to go more deeply into their nature. You see, so here he's teaching us, this is how we overcome it. He says, you have to begin your discernment, because your discernment leads you to things that are true. And being led to things that are true adds to your faith, right? And your faith allows you to take refuge. And your refuge allows you to know your true nature, allows you to be in the company of pure awareness, pure light, pure love, pure wisdom. And that presence of pure wisdom will transcend your wrong ideas about yourself and give you freedom, deliver you to the beloved, to your highest ideal. One spiritual writer speaks of it in this way. Love, he says, usually grows with knowledge, and the greater the depth and extent of the knowledge, the more love there will be, the more easily the heart will soften, the more easily it will lay itself open to the love of God, as it diligently gazes upon the very fullness and beauty of the divine nature and his unbounded love for humanity. Right? So this is why we're doing these things. This is why we set ourselves in the presence and sit there through our practice, trying to be in the presence, trying to be purely present, trying to let go of the past, which is our attachments, our samskaras, trying to let go of the future, which is our desires and the hopes of fulfilling an imagined lack, and to return to now, which is ourself. The pure self is now, this capital S self that we talk about is this moment. We try to inhabit this moment. Perfect, full, and free, right? If we can drop the past, drop the future, we become ourself with a capital S. We become what we are, instead of what the mind and the ego has described us as, instead of what the mind and body have told us we are. Finally, forgetting those things and sitting in pure mind, we become aware of what we are, not by what we learn or what we're told, but simply by being, without calculation. So now you see that the cause of those sins which you read over is slothfulness in thinking about spiritual things. Yes, being lazy in controlling our mind, in doing our discernment, in paying attention, right? In thinking about spiritual things, sloth, which stifles the feeling of the need of such thought. If you want to know how to overcome this evil, strive after enlightenment of spirit by every means in your power. Attain it by diligently studying the scriptures and the words of the Holy Fathers, by the help of the meditations and spiritual counsel, and by the conversation of those who are wise in Christ or in spiritual life. Ah, dear brother, how much disaster we meet with just because we are lazy about seeking light for our souls through the word of truth. We do not study God's law day and night, and we do not pray about it diligently and unceasingly. And because of this, our inner man is hungry and cold, starved, so that it has no strength to take a bold step forward upon the road of righteousness and salvation. And so, beloved, let us resolve to make use of these methods, and as often as possible, fill our mind with thoughts of heavenly things, and love, poured down into our hearts from on high, will burst into flame within us. We will do this together and pray as often as we can, For prayer is the chief and strongest means for our renewal and well-being. We will pray. In the words of the Holy Church, teach us, O God, make us fit to love you now, as I have loved sin in the past. This is that transformation. And so it's simply to go on with our practice, but with this level of diligence, this level of commitment to that, this level of inspiration. This isn't a type A personality undertaking. We're not driven on this. We're inspired into this. We're not driven to do this and do it right, do it big. We're alphas. We're going to make this happen. No. This is a matter of inspiration, a matter of inner silence. So you hear the voice of love spontaneously called forward in the purity of what you are and what you have always been, in the divine comfort of the self, taking refuge from all the other things that have assailed us in our being. So this is our Vedic Christianity. This is spiritual life in any path, in any tradition. This knowledge. You are free.